Nobody tells you that becoming someone new is going to feel like a loss. They make transformation sound purely addictive, like you just keep adding better things to who you already are, and the old version quietly steps aside. But here's what they leave out: becoming who you're meant to be requires releasing who you have been. And there is a word for what that release feels like. It's grief. And if you have been trying to build a new version of yourself while holding tightly onto the old one, that is exactly why it feels so hard. And that is what we're getting into today. I'm Caren, and this is The Rewrite, a podcast about finding the courage to pursue the life you already know you're meant to live. If you're new here, welcome. Every episode stands on its own, so you can start right here. And before we dive in, if what I bring to the show resonates with you, I want to ask you to subscribe and follow. Every subscription, every share does more than support this show. It puts the conversation in front of someone who may need to hear it exactly when they need it most. These small things genuinely make a difference in this world, and I believe that with everything in me. So thank you very much. Now, today we're talking about something that does not get discussed enough in the conversation about growth and becoming. It's the grief that comes with it, the loss of who you were that has to happen before who you're becoming can fully arrive. And if you've been wondering why the work of changing your life feels heavier than you expected, this episode might be exactly what you need to hear. Here is what most people do when they decide to change their lives. They add. They add new habits, new goals, new routines, new thinking. They build a new version of themselves on top of everything the old version was still holding on to. And then they wonder why the new things keep slipping, why they keep reverting, why the momentum never quite sustains. It's because you cannot build something new on a foundation that has not been cleared. There is an old image I keep coming back to when I think about this, and it's the parable of the wineskin. Now, I understand what this parable truly means in its original context, but the concept translates powerfully when we're talking about your calling and who you are becoming as well. You cannot pour new wine into an old wineskin. The old skin has already been stretched to its limit. It cannot expand to hold something new. If you try to force it, the skin breaks and you lose everything. The new wine requires a new skin. You cannot grow if you do not let go. And that sounds simple. And in theory, it is. But in practice, letting go of who you have been is one of the hardest things a person can do. Because the old version of you was not all bad. It served a purpose. It kept you safe. It was familiar. And familiar, even when it's no longer serving you, feels like home in a way that the new and unfamiliar never quite does at first. So you hold on to both, the old version and the new aspiration, and you wonder why you feel so stretched. I want to be specific about what I had to grieve. Not a relationship or a job, but a version of myself. The version that was always available, always ready for the social gathering, always there when someone wanted company or conversation or a night out. And when my daily responsibilities were checked off, I would find myself filling the space with things that felt good in the moment, but did not move anything forward. Escapes, distractions disguised as living, and I knew it. That is the part that made it complicated. I knew I was staying stagnant by choice, not because I lacked direction, but because the familiar was easier than the focus. Because showing up for everyone else felt more comfortable than showing up for the calling. Letting that go required something I did not expect. It required me to become less available, to be more selective with where I put my time and my energy, to say no to things I genuinely enjoyed because yes to them meant no to what mattered most. And that hurt some people, not because my intentions were unkind, because they weren't, but because the version of me they had built their expectations around was changing. And people are not always prepared for the person they know to become someone different. I still miss those gatherings, but I've learned to be okay with that, to hold the missing without letting it pull me back, to grieve the ease of that season without abandoning it entirely. That return is now reserved for special moments rather than the weekly weekends. That is the work of reconstruction. It's not all forward momentum and breakthrough moments. Some of it is quiet, uncomfortable. It feels more like a loss than gain. And that is completely normal. It means you're actually doing it. There is research that supports what you're feeling when you try to become someone new and the old version keeps pulling you back. Psychologists calls this identity disruption. When we change significantly, whether in our behavior, our relationships, our roles, or our sense of purpose, we experience a form of psychological disorientation. The self we have known, the one we have built our internal story around, is being rewritten. And the mind, which is wired for consistency and pattern, resists that rewriting, even when the conscious self is asking for it. William Bridges, an expert on life transitions, wrote that the hardest part of any transition is not the new beginning, it's the ending, the letting go of what came before. He observed that most people rush through the ending because it's uncomfortable. They want to get to the new thing as fast as possible, but the ending, the grief, the release is not the obstacle to the transition. It is the transition. You cannot skip it and arrive whole on the other side. What this means practically is that the discomfort you feel when you're trying to change is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's a sign that the change is real. Superficial change does not feel like loss. Deep change always does. I want to speak to something specific now because I know this episode is landing for someone who has been doing the work, who made the decision, who started building, and who keeps getting pulled off course by old patterns, old thinking, old versions of themselves that show up at the worst possible moments and make the familiar feel irresistible. Here's what I want you to hear. Life will test you. No matter how far along you are, no matter how clear your direction is, no matter how committed you are to the new version of yourself you are building. The test does not mean you are failing. It means you are progressing. You have to stay fixed on what you're trying to accomplish, not rigidly or without grace for yourself, but with enough clarity that when the pull of the old self shows up, you recognize it immediately and choose differently. And you have to remember two things simultaneously: how far you have already come and how you feel when you arrive. Because the cost of allowing yourself to be pulled off course is not just the time lost. It is the version of yourself you're becoming that has to wait a little longer. And that version deserves better than to keep waiting. Habits take time to build. The new identity does not arrive overnight. Give yourself grace in the building of it. Every action has a consequence, good or bad. Every choice you make toward the new version of yourself is a vote for who you are becoming. And every time you choose the familiar over the necessary, that is a vote too. You get to decide which votes you are casting. Here is something I want to share that is specific to my own experience of this. There are days when I am mentally exhausted, when the idea of sitting down to write or plan or record feels like more than I have to give. And on those days, I will hear a voice start talking me out of it, telling me I can do it tomorrow, telling me I need a break, telling me it's okay to let this one slide, and so on. And here's what I've learned about that voice. The louder it gets, the closer I am to something important. When I feel that resistance showing up with that kind of intensity, I press in harder. Not because I'm immune to the exhaustion, but because I have learned that the resistance is not random. Something is intentionally working against what I am building, and what I am building is for the good of the world. Darkness cannot dwell where there is light, and I intend to fight to bring that light. That is not motivation speaking. That is a decision, a daily, sometimes hourly decision to keep going when the old self would have stopped, to press in when the new version of me is being tested, to choose the discomfort of growth over the comfort of staying exactly where I am. That is what reconstruction actually looks like from the inside. Not a highlight reel, not a breakthrough every day. Some days it's just pressing in when every part of you wants to stop, but doing it anyway. I want to offer you something before we get to the reflection part. Stop thinking of the grief as a problem to solve. The grief of releasing an old identity is not weakness. It is not evidence that you made the wrong choice or that you're not cut out for this. It is evidence that what you are leaving behind was real. that it mattered, that you're human enough to feel the weight of what you're walking away from. Honor that. And then keep walking, because the version of you that is waiting on the other side of this grief is not a stranger. It is the most honest version of yourself you have ever been. The one that stopped performing for the comfort of others and started building for the truth of your calling. That version is worth grieving for. So before the next episode, here's what I want you to do. Identify one version of yourself that you've been holding on to that no longer serves who you're becoming. Not a person, not a place, a version of you, a habit, a pattern, a role, an availability that belongs to the old skin and not the new one. Write it down. And then write your honest answer to this question. What would it cost me to keep holding on to this? And what would it free me to become if I finally let go? Not a plan, just honesty. Because remember, you cannot grow if you don't let go. And the version of you that is waiting on the other side of that release is worth every uncomfortable step it takes to get there. Thank you so much for being here with me today. If this episode made you uncomfortable, sit with that. The discomfort is telling you something worth listening to. Make sure you're subscribed. New episodes drop every week, and where we're going next continues to build on everything that we are doing together. And if you want a structured place to do this work, I put together a free 10-week workbook that walks you through everything we have covered in the first 10 episodes of this show. It's completely free, and the link is in the description below. This is the rewrite, because your story isn't finished yet.